Welcome everyone to this LinkedIn Live broadcast session. We're going to be talking about how can brands work with influencers in regulated industries. I'm Tim, CEO of Analytica. We provide influence marketing and advocacy software to enterprise brands and help them connect with experts and influencers to create inspiring content. So today I'm very excited. We're going to be talking about the challenges of regulated industries and how best these can be overcome when partnering with influencers to create and promote content. I'm delighted to be joined by three amazing experts in this area. So first of all, Luke Brilliant-Jones, based in Cambridge in the UK, founder and CEO of OST, the social media agency. Luke says he helps serious people to understand social media. I can assure you that he's not all serious himself, but he does mean business. I've worked with him for many years, and he's worked with a lot of influencers in regulated industries, such as finance and pharma, and very well qualified to talk about this topic. We're also joined by Effie Pilarinu, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, normally based in Freiburg, Switzerland, but today is speaking to you from Greece. She's a very well-known fintech and blockchain influencer, and she's founder of her own advisory practice. And Kevin Jackson, last but not least, based in Virginia, near Washington, D.C., CEO and founder of GC GlobalNet, and a globally recognized cybersecurity and cloud computing expert. So a very warm welcome to everyone. Just before I get started, I just really wanted to provide a bit of background about why we're doing this LinkedIn Live session. Influencer marketing is seen by many brands as a B2C play, but actually there's arguably a significantly greater opportunity for B2B brands for influencer marketing. And heavily regulated industries have enough challenges with creating content through their brands and their employees without adding external influencers into the mix. And creating content with external influencers in heavily regulated industries has some challenges, and a lot of brands, therefore don't leverage that opportunity, which I think is a shame. In this LinkedIn Live, we're going to discuss many of the challenges, also some of the solutions for how you can get through this. There are many regulated industries. So you were talking about finance and tech, but they could be pharma, agriculture, travel and transportation, telecoms, fisheries, forestry, for example. So there are many, many different sectors. There are also different regulatory bodies per country and region. From an advertising promotional standpoint, there are different regulators, such as the FTC in the US and the ASA in the UK. Today, we're going to be talking mainly about the finance and tech industry, and we're going to be talking about US and European regulators. So really excited to get started. Just wanted to ask each of the experts on the panel here today to say a bit more about yourselves and to talk about some of the challenges that you have faced from creating influencer content in regulated industries. So that would be great. So Luke, if you wouldn't mind kicking off, that would be fantastic. And then followed by Effie and then Kevin.
Thanks, Tim. Great to be on here. Yeah, absolutely. So I guess, from an agency perspective, we work with lots of clients. We're in B2B, so all of our clients are in this kind of space, largely tech as well. So we've in recent years quite often come across companies that are really hesitant to get into influencer marketing because of the regulatory side of things. There are other hesitancies as well, that they're sort of, a lot of them looking for leads, and they're wondering whether influencer marketing will generate that and all these things. So we found kind of as an agency that we're needing to sort of do the research for them and dig into these topics for them, because often, although they're quite up on their regulations, they don't know how they apply to influencer marketing. And that seems to be the big gap that exists at the moment, this lack of knowledge. And even when you talk to the regulators in the different sectors, they don't really understand influencer marketing generally either. So there's this big gap, and we're just part of the solution, kind of filling that gap with knowledge and insights. But to be clear, in my view, I think most sectors are kind of making this up on the fly at the moment. So there's no right or wrong answers to some extent.
Fantastic. So you're working as real educators, both from the regulatory standpoint and from the influencers, and probably from the brands as well. So sounds like you're really helping advance the industry. Effie, would love to get a bit more background about you and and some of your experiences about the challenges.
Yeah, well, I come from the traditional finance industry. I started my career on Wall Street in New York. Of course, a very highly regulated industry. I cannot forget the team of lawyers that we had to check for everything internally and externally, whether it was research, communication, term sheets, anything had to go through compliance with the lawyers and so on. In that respect, nothing has changed in the industry. And at the same time, when I think of all the innovators, call them the fintechs, they may have a lighter regulation initially, but as they grow up, they start to also get into the regulatory hurdles and the complexities, because as you already mentioned, the world is diverse. Cross-border business is tough from a regulatory point of view. I'm sure we'll have the opportunity to talk about these challenges. I've been working and focused on the fintech industry, and that's not only the startups, it includes technology vendors, it includes incumbent banks and financial institutions, and the startups, of course. And I help them mainly in their thought leadership and their content creation. And again, I look forward to discussing more details and sharing my experience of how it's been. And as I assume everybody will say, the business has changed a lot over the past 1 or 2 years with COVID. So over to you, Kevin.
Well, thank you very much, Effie and Luke. I am just so honored to be here on the same screen with you. And as you have said, business has changed a lot. And change is something that's not only continuous, but it's accelerating. And I think that's one of the major reasons why influencers are becoming so, or have become so important in the B2B world. Just by what we're doing today, business is global. We're in Greece, we're in the UK, we're in the US. We have people that are looking at us from all over the world. So when you are communicating across the industry, you have to leverage mass media medium and make observations from a global perspective. And this is one thing that it's even more critical when you're operating in a highly regulated industry. I have experience working with companies like Refinitiv and Webull and AT&T Business and their financial industry vertical. And what I've found is that influencer marketing is really about education. It's about informing from a professional point of view what's happening in the world within your industry and how these changes relate to the individual and to the broader ecosystem of the industry. And so influencers bring that value, the ability to observe from a interested party point of view, but they also bring that experience and that professionalism from outside, apart from the marketing, where you're, as a marketeer, you're trying to say why you are different or better than your competitors. But from an influencer point of view, you're explaining what's happening across the industry. So that's what's changing. And it's really driven by this digital transformation. So thank you very much for the opportunity to discuss it.
Yeah, I think what's really interesting already is that education has been the main word, I think, used both in terms of explaining the regulatory and compliance landscape, but also with influencers actually, their main job being to educate the marketplace. So I guess when it comes to creating content, what is the right? I mean, Luke, what would you say is the most successful, content, and maybe the most compliant content? Because I imagine there are going to be issues with live content. If this was a financial podcast, for example, we were going live, and maybe there wasn't lots of financial expertise, that might present a brand risk, for example. But your written blog might be signed off, but you also want to have agile content, and video is very impactful nowadays. So what would you say is the right or the most effective content in regulated industries?
Well, it all comes down to trust, really, and that's the key thing. All of these businesses are putting out lots of communication all day, every day, in different ways, and all of that technically is regulated in different ways. So the key thing is how do they manage to do that without getting the lawyers to read and rewrite everything? And it's really that they trust that their teams are doing it right, and they've done it right so many times that they trust them to do it. So that's our role, really, is to build that trust in whatever medium or format we're doing. So typically, yes, we'll start with something low risk. So we'll contact Kevin and say, Kevin, we'd love to quote you, we'd love to get you involved in something. Maybe you can give us a written quote, and we can include that in something. And that'll get reviewed by lawyers and approved, whatever, and they'll look at Kevin and go, well, okay, he is an expert, we trust him, and they'll let us go forward with that. But before they'll let us do a live like this, a LinkedIn Live or something, we would have to have gone through that process quite a few times to get that trust. So for me, it's not really about the format. It's about starting small, building the trust internally, and then having the right to go out and do the live stuff and get really excited. Because actually, if we were to say, yeah, we're going to put Effie on stage at an event, quite quickly they would go, okay, that's great, yeah, you can go and do that. So it's already happening in a real life environment. But suddenly, as soon as you take it virtual, take it online, give it a permanence, they're a bit more worried about it. So,
yeah, I think that is fascinating, isn't it? Because I know that Effie, you do some global event speaking. So yeah, have you found what content formats have you found to be very effective that maybe don't have to go through as so many regulatory checks?
Well, I mean, it depends on the size of the business that you're working. I mean, in finance, not all businesses are regulated with the same degree, if you like. You have, for example, a bank with a full banking license or a universal banking license. There you will naturally expect more scrutiny versus a fintech or a payment institution with an e-money license. So it really varies. For me, my experience is that both blogs and recorded interviews, recorded videos where there's some type of preparation and there's some potential to edit, those are the safest types of content. And in terms of live video and live sessions, what I like and what I've done in my experience is, if we are discussing a research piece, a white paper that the client has put out, or a survey that we've already written a blog about, and we want to animate it and repurpose it, then we can do a live, because as Kevin was saying, and as Luke was saying, there's the experience and the trust of what are the limits of what we need to discuss. So I like to think of it as building around a core theme, be it a research piece, be it a trend, be it a challenge. If we're talking about new regulation, how to use this technology for a certain type of new regulation, then we build up our content. And the safest way is to start with the blog, to start with the pre-recorded interview, and then repurpose with live video.
Great, fantastic. I love that. And Kevin, so yeah, could you dig into a bit more detail of some of the experiences? You mentioned AT&T Business and Refinitiv as well. Talk to us a bit about some of the challenges or some of the codes of conduct that you've had to sort of go through as an influencer when working and partnering with those brands.
I think that was a pretty interesting term you used when you say code of conduct, because the very start, the very first place you start when you're thinking about working with an influencer is you have to know that an effective influencer in any industry is a practicing professional that has gained deep business insight through longevity and varied experience, right? The difference between doing this in a regulated and a non-regulated industry is that experience includes a deep understanding of applicable laws and regulations. That is a must. But it only begins there, because you not only have to be a professional and a good professional, you really have to be good at what you do, but you have to have journalistic morality, right? You have to follow a code of conduct of a journalist, that you're going to speak the truth, that you're not a mouthpiece. Okay, so that's another code of conduct you have to think about. Also, you are a service provider to your customer, so you have a duty to help your customer, to fulfill your customer's goals, aspirations, and requirements. And in doing that, you have to make sure that they align with your own viewpoints, your own goals, and what your professional position is, as well as your journalistic position. And finally, you have a code of conduct to your audience. You are a content provider. They are listening to you because they believe you. They want to learn from you. As we said before, a lot of this is education. So you must be truthful. You need to maintain your independence. In fact, an influencer's independence is what makes them a powerful influencer for a customer. So they align. So there's really 4 codes that you have to align by: your professional code, journalistic code, your code as a service provider to your customer, and as a content provider to your audience. So it can get difficult.
Yeah, and
I'd like to add to what Kevin said, Tim, because really he raised some great points. What I'd like to add is a good influencer has to have a great mix of content that is client content and content that is completely independent. Mm-hmm. And I have my own sort of rule of thumb of that mix, because really what my passion, my purpose is to raise awareness, to help people understand trends, insights, share from others too, and eventually educate, but in a very practical sense, not in the academic sense, in the professional field sense. So it is extremely delicate, this role. So if you're only putting out content that is generated, through business, you don't keep your independence. And in that process, you also formulate what are the specific themes that you care about to talk about. If you're, in the finance industry, are you more talking about wealth management or, the fiduciary duties? Are you talking more about regulatory challenges? Are you talking more about sustainability? All those issues, and how can you help clients that care about those issues? So influencers at the B2B level are also developing specialties, if you want.
Yes.
And I love what...
Just sort of as an add-on to that, it requires mutual respect between the brand and the influencer. They have to respect the knowledge of each other. And this education role of an influencer is not just to the audience, it's to the brand as well.
I absolutely love this. I think when we were talking about doing this LinkedIn Live, April Rudin, who's a well-known fintech influencer globally as well, she was talking about you got to get the right content and you've got to get expertise within the industry. And I think that resonates really well with what both you, Effie, and Kevin have been saying, that you both are from the sort of finance and tech industries. You understand it. You understand the regulatory environment, and you want to maintain your independent voice, and you're working with a mindset of a journalist as well, which is absolutely brilliant. And I love the independence angle and the sort of two-way partnership, because you have to obviously serve your audience, and the brand is accessing that as well. So I mean, look, it seems brands work with Effie and Kevin. It seems pretty easy, right? Everyone should just jump in and work with them, because they're great independent experts that are gonna educate the marketplace. So obviously there are other challenges. You talked about and you talked to me personally about editorial control, and I know that you've been having to explain and educate a bunch of different lawyers in the FCA in the UK. So it would be great to understand some of the other challenges which you've experienced from maybe from an advertising standpoint. When great influencers like Effie and Kevin are creating content, what are the regulations? Should they put hashtag spon or ad? I mean, they're not really advertising. They've got independent voices. Should they put brand partner like a lot of influencers do in non-regulated industry? What's the latest advice?
So yeah, just a caveat, I'm not a lawyer here, but I do spend enough time talking to them that I think I know what they would say. But anyway, yeah, find your own lawyer if you need one. I would just add to those comments that were made. It is interesting that if you look at what the regulators are after, it is independence, it is honesty, it's all that stuff, which actually in B2B, the influencers are, because they have this integrity and they need to maintain their personal brands. So, I think a lot of the narrative around influencer marketing is in the consumer space, where you could say the integrity is less obvious and it is less at the foremind of the influencers. So that narrative has dominated the way that most companies and their lawyers go forward with this. So our job is to go, no, this is a different space. These influencers aren't after pure cash. They do have their own reputations, etc. So that it's shifting that narrative. That's the first thing. Broadly, when we're working with finance, for example, there are two states of affairs. There's whether you're paying the influencer and whether you're not. And broadly, if you're paying them, there are definite regulations. So in the UK, that would be the sort of FCA, Financial Conduct Authority, CMA, Competition Markets Authority, and also obviously the baseline is the Advertising Standards Authority. So those rules apply to everybody, not just in finance. And all of them, if you're paying somebody or rewarding them in some way or giving them any kind of benefit in kind, they need to be disclaiming that. So there needs to be a nice, clear disclaimer around the relationship that you have. And depending on the regulator, that relationship lasts for a period after the benefit is transferred. So it could be 12 months after. That's a typical timescale. So if somebody's spoken at an event for you and they've been paid for that, and then you want to work with them just organically on some stuff, they should be disclaiming the relationship that they have with you in that subsequent engagement as well. So that's the sort of broad side. The only other little tricky thing is this thing about editorial control. So in certain circumstances, if an influencer is deemed, if you're deemed to have influence over their editorial, even if you're not paying them, that could be considered a regulated relationship. So there are certain FCA rules that are worth looking at in the UK, and I think in the US they have similar, perhaps issues around that. So it does get a bit muddy, but the biggie is payment or reward in any format. That's the difference.
I'd love to hear from you, Effie. What do you think from an influencer's standpoint when brands contact you? How are you given full editorial control? If you're not, or they want to get a few messages across, like how do you showcase to the world that you're in a paid partnership with them?
I mean, in the form of a blog, I always disclose at the bottom of the blog that XYZ is a client. The way I like to work is on thought leadership pieces, which are not at all selling any product of either the tech client that I'm working with or any other financial institution, and also educational series. I've worked with banks on educational, content. I've worked with tech vendors, Oracle, SAP, Salesforce, and so on. And again, it's all thought leadership content. And I try to avoid product, launches and so on. In terms of the video, again, on my YouTube channel, in the description, I will disclose that this company is a client of mine. And I think it is fair. And again, for me, it's a question of the proportion of this type of content that I put out and the content that I continuously put out, which is independent, both on LinkedIn and on Twitter, my podcasts, my YouTubes. There's a very substantial amount that is completely, I would say, independent and not paid for. So
Great.
That is how I see that.
Great, thank you. And Kevin, with your LinkedIn and your posts and tweets, would you put hashtag AT&T business partner or something like that? Or if it's completely independent thought leadership, do you see yourself in the community just posting content because it's not really about the brand, it's about the topic? What's your perspective on that?
Well, once again, and I may seem to be harping on this, but it's about professionalism, right? And it's all about context. Yes, if I get sponsored or asked to write content or put a post on social media, absolutely. I always disclose that I'm doing that in collaboration with a brand. But the content, I always present the content within the context of the entire industry. I try to present what my partner is doing and how, as an example of what's going on in the industry. I avoid, or I like to say never, but endorse something as the best, because the best always changes. Even if you're working with a product or a brand that you are personally believe is the best. There is things that you don't know. Okay, so the context is critical, and it's important for your own professionalism. And on the area of payment, uh, a influencer is not a parrot. When a brand hires an influencer, they're not trying to hire a parrot, right? So don't expect to have a parent. Payment is for knowledge, experience, and advice, not words. And finally, one of the things I think that brands fail to do, which is a very powerful thing when they're using influencers, is to highlight the influencer's professional history. For instance, I was a vice president at JP Morgan Chase, working out of headquarters in New York headquarters, managing their global IT projects office. That is something that I needed to know regulatory requirements and restrictions from a global perspective. That's how I gained a lot of my understanding and knowledge of the finance industry. So if you're going to have an influencer with that type of background, make it known. Sometimes, even if it was with a competitor, that's even better.
I love that, and I think that both yourself working for JP Morgan Chase and Effie, when you're talking about your experience in Wall Street, that's really powerful, and people and brands can see the credibility and trust that we talked about at the beginning. The interesting thing that I've seen over the past few years is the word influencer. It turns a lot of people off within brands. I just wondered, Luke, what you think about if you're working with a finance brand or a pharma brand, for example. You say, let's run an influencer program, and they think, oh, that's people on Instagram pushing a product, for example. Obviously, this conversation is totally different. This is more of an analyst relations. This is more of a journalist exercise. What do you think the best ways of describing influencer generated content in a regulated industry so that it actually it sits as like, these are just wonderful industry experts creating educational content for your brand?
Yeah, I mean, the terminology does definitely, it's part of that sort of narrative that we step into, sadly, in many situations. So if we can go in and, for example, with Sage, you're familiar, Tim, the accountancy software company. With them, we set up their global influencer program as their experts program. And I think that automatically set us off down the right route, because we had them termed as experts. We validated each individual as an expert, and then we worked with them and they were accepted across the business in that sense. Whereas with other companies, they want to go with the term influencer, and it does cause a few issues. So definitely makes a difference, the terminology around that. I think the other thing is getting into the detail of who these people are. So as you all know as well, Tim, I mean, there are sort of amplifiers in sectors. So people who have large followings on social channels who aren't necessarily subject matter experts. And at the other end of the scale, obviously, you've got some really brilliant subject matter experts who don't have a lot of followers. So we're always trying to find a middle ground between that, so that we're getting people who do have a genuine audience and a reach and impact, but also have the expertise to go with it. And it's getting agreement with the client and the influencers in between the two of what level we're going in at. And so the expectations are set and everybody knows, what we're going in as. Whereas some companies really want to go for the amplifier route. They're just after driving their reach and awareness, and that's what they want to go for. So those things can be balanced, need to be balanced.
And I'd love to get Effie and Kevin, your perspective on the term influencer. Do you like being called an influencer? Would you rather be an industry expert that's going to create thought leadership content? What's your perspective, and And also, do people come to you saying, "I'd like you to promote this article" or something like that? I'd love to get the perspectives on those two questions.
Yes.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Okay, so I mean, the term influencer and also in some parts of the world, key opinion leader are also used. And I kind of like KOL, a key opinion leader, or professional, and I don't like influencer because of its association with the B2C or consumer products market. But unfortunately, you really can't get away from it. So whenever I'm in this type of discussion, even if they're calling it an influencer, I like to highlight the fact that I'm a thought leader in industry. I create content to educate the marketplace and the consumers of the products and services from that marketplace. And I always emphasize that in the content that I produce. And even more important, lawyers need education too. So when you're talking to the lawyers about limits, restrictions, or what they depend on precedents. But in what we are doing, that precedence doesn't exist. And things are changing so fast that what precedents you may think existed was set a year ago, they change. So that being active within an industry and being an industry thought leader is critical. So, and if you continually position yourself in that way, then it doesn't matter what they call you. If they call you an influencer, it doesn't matter because you have gained trust with your audience within the industry, and you can remain independent.
Great, fantastic. What do you think, Effie?
I mean, I'm with Kevin. I don't like the umbrella term influencer, but we can't get away from it. To me, also thought leader, content creator. I like to stress content creation because that's what I do, and that's how I feel that I'm different than others. I'm passionate about it. I write blogs, I do video, I do audio, I do posters. This is what I look to do. And I have the industry expertise. I didn't, wake up one day and say that, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I mean, obviously, on the innovation front, it's learning by doing and developing a network globally to follow the trends. I think it's important to share with our audience that the business, the B2B influencer business has changed over this COVID era. I have experienced this, and I assume most in our business have, because digital business has increased, because brands were more open to, if you want, experiment with new content. I had the chance to work with more brands, both publicly but also privately. And I think this is a point that we should stress here, that some brands want to hire influencers, thought leaders for private events, be it a round table, whatever it is, for their prospects, for their, industry or cross-industry outreach and so on. And I think that's also a great opportunity that is underutilized by the industry. And it's very different than the client that Luke was talking about that is looking for an amplifier, in social media. So on the one extreme, we have the need to amplify in social media. In the middle, we have content creation, independent or collaborative content creation and sharing on social media. And then on the other end, I see private collaboration with the brands. And I think all of them are underutilized, but the private part is even more underutilized. And there's a lot that we can do and customize and design with clients.
Yeah, I love that, Effie, and I couldn't agree more with the private influence and the event, the private event stuff, because it's not all about social media. And I think what's really interesting from my perspective is, the old in the olden time, the CFO maybe would jump in a taxi at 5 a.m. and read the paper, and they would be influenced by different mediums now. And I just wondered, in the sort of regulated industries like pharma, like finance, whether, Luke, you think that the audience has, how the audience has changed over the years, whether this kind of traditional audience that brands are trying to reach is now on social, now on LinkedIn and Twitter, as well as obviously having the events, because events used to be, obviously one of the main channels for influence, and also obviously through traditional journalism and advertising.
Yeah, interesting. I think certainly, everybody mentioned at the beginning, business has changed over the last couple of years. One of the things we've noticed is that we often get higher caliber individuals joining virtual activities and events that we perhaps didn't before. I think there has been we've all had to go kind of virtual with our engagements, the things we watch, the things we look out for. Many people have become re-engaged with LinkedIn as a platform. So we've actually seen a sort of uplift in the audience for all sorts of media online, but especially kind of expert-led thought leadership content that is designed for more senior people. So I think that's definitely been the case. I know there's been a bit of an upswell in focus on influencers. That was kind of happening anyway, but I think that's partly due to the pandemic. We've seen an increase.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Luke. And Clifton just posted a comment. Many super helpful tips and insights. Thank you so much for taking time to share your knowledge. So thank you very much for watching, Clifton, for commenting on the LinkedIn Live. We're going to be promoting a lot of the sort of sound bites from this over the next couple of weeks. So if you're listening, please watch out for that. I'd like to just end, because we're 45 minutes in already. So I want to wrap up. I could talk about this for hours. I didn't think I could talk about regulation for hours, but it's something that has been super fascinating. I'd love to hear, maybe in 30 seconds, like what advice you would give brands from each of you to create content in regulated industries. So maybe Kevin, if you could go first, and then Effie, and then Luke, if you could wrap up.
Well, sure. Thank you. And this has been enjoyable. I've learned a lot, and thank you for putting this together. So I guess in my 30 seconds, I'm going to sort of hang on to Effie's coattails, because we, in this market, in this industry, we wear multiple hats. Yes, I'm an influencer. I have reach, I have engagement of a large audience, so I can get your word out. But also, I'm a marketeer. I create content. I can create video, a text, or audio to explain, to educate, to help. But I'm also a consultant, right? I understand the industry. I can provide advice on a business model or how to approach a market. So if you engage with me, engage all three hats as a brand. Don't just see me as a influencer and go hire somebody else as a marketeer and a third person as a consultant. You get much more value, insight from leveraging all of the tools we bring to the table. So
fantastic. Thank you, Kevin.
I'll echo Kevin. I liked what Kevin said. I like to say that I operate in the intersection of business development, marketing, as a domain expert, and I'm passionate to create content. And what I love is to collaborate with my client and brainstorm and come up with new ideas that are suitable for the client. So this is the kind of relationship that I like to have. And I'm very clear on what are the things that I care about and that my audience will really listen when I'm talking about those issues. Can help clients really, what are the issues that everybody's on their mind, what people want to hear about, what resonates, what's the narrative, and how can we shape the narrative going forward. So these are the things that sort of move me.
Fantastic. Thank you, Effie.
That teased me up perfectly, actually. Why not have two influencers going on before me? So yeah, I mean, the key thing, as you mentioned before, Tim, is focusing topics not on product launches, not on the kind of sales aspects of things, but on the big ticket industry level topics. And then you're staying out of any of the potential risks of working with influencers. But also you're doing things that are interesting to them. You know, Effie, Kevin, others, they're all interested in those big ticket topics. So focus on those, find the mutual benefit for them, make sure that you're aligning with the influencer's goals so that you're providing some value there as well. And if you do then need to pay them as well, make sure you take the pain out of it. So make it nice and clear, provide a really nice clear hashtag, you know, lead the way and make it a really good experience for everyone.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for joining. I really enjoyed this chat. You know, I think I've certainly learned a lot. It's been great to just get, you know, Luke as a sort of leading agency in this field, and two influencers, I should say, industry thought leaders, experts, whatever, people, content creators. They, as Kevin said, they wear multiple hats, but it is about collaboration. It is about creating industry content, not talking about the brand. And I hope that anyone's watching this is just inspired to create, you know, industry leading expertise. You know, the content creation that you can create is going to deliver far more impact than the brand talking about itself. So thank you so much, and I will be doing future LinkedIn Lives on other topics and challenges to the influence marketing space. So thank you again, and thank you for watching, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.